Good morning, everybody. To the curators, I think we'll use this space. Okay. Good morning, everybody, again. Yeah, my name is Mutaahi. I am going to be your moderator for this panel. We had 4 panelists. Unfortunately, one of them could not be here. The other 2 are going to be virtual. So it will be the 2 of us on stage, but I will join him in a few seconds. First of all, Dr. Jedra, you mentioned you need $5 million. The gentleman next to you has 19.4 trillion. I suggest you either take his number, form a WhatsApp group, but don't let him go untapped. Because as he has made it clear, and also I think the PS has mentioned, there's quite a bit of money sitting there. So friends, the purpose of our panel today is to talk about opportunities in the sector. In my other life, I run an investment advisory firm, and we've been supporting businesses in the region to raise capital, with a presence here, Kenya, Amsterdam, and in Kigali. Now, I can tell you, when we talk to these investors, mining doesn't come up. We hear about so many requests for information from investors, entrepreneurs, but mining is this dark thing that nobody talks about. There's many reasons. Some think it is too risky. The previous speaker just mentioned that. Others think it takes too long in terms of return on investment. But also, let's be honest, it has a bit of shadiness to it sometimes.
A little bit, and then transitioned into different areas in the corporate world. I'm a retiree. I retired, my last job was at Botswana, as has been ably made clear in the introduction. And so as I say, I'm happy to be here. I'm glad I'm the only woman in a panel of gentlemen, including the moderator. But I'm hoping that Mkutano will make good with that and have a lot more inclusivity next time. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Esther. And last but not least, Mr. Data Gabriel from the Ministry of Energy. Hello? Let's give him a few seconds and see. Yeah, there we are. Good morning, Gabriel. Hello, good morning, Gabriel. I'm not sure if he can hear us. Okay, somebody can. Okay, as we try to get him back online, we'll get started. I'd hope to start off with him, sort of to lay the landscape from a regulatory standpoint, but maybe we'll start with Humphrey, who's here right now. So we've had different things from a few of the speakers already. I think a good place to start is from the side of the private sector. What does the landscape look like for you and your membership in terms of opportunities, where you see the sector going, both in the short term, medium term, and potentially the long term? We'll come back to Gabriel and talk about how that layers on top of the regulation and all the work they're doing from the ministry standpoint.
Thank you very much. Uganda as a country is poised to take off when it comes to the areas of energy and minerals. Now, a number of people may be wondering, how do you link the two, energy and minerals? The whole world right now is talking about the energy transition. Stofunj mentioned earlier, a just energy transition. And as we talk about a just energy transition, it means that you need more and more clean energy. As mentioned earlier, Uganda produces about 1,500 megawatts of power right now. And our installed capacity is about 1,800 megawatts, though we are evacuating 1,500 megawatts of power. In order to drive the industrialization plans of this country, the idea is to be able to produce 52,000 megawatts of power by 2040 in Uganda. And a big chunk of that must be clean energy. We're talking about hydropower about 4,500 megawatts, peat 800 megawatts, geothermal about 1,500 megawatts, wind 200 megawatts of power, solar 10,000 megawatts, nuclear energy 24,000 megawatts by 2040. And then from the fossil fuels, the work that is being done in the Albertine Graben is meant to fund this entire energy journey of Uganda. Now, and I know Mr. Data will probably speak to this, that the government has been able to do what is called aerial geomagnetic survey of 80% of the country to find out what minerals we have in this country. The 20% is the Karamoja region, which is being completed and analysis being done. And a number of the minerals required in this energy transition actually do occur here in Uganda. Because when we talk about clean energy, you're talking about the need for rare earth minerals. You're talking about the need for the graphites. You're talking about the need for the critical minerals, what are known as the critical minerals. And these are what are used to either generate or store clean energy. So with the new law that was put in place in 2022, there is indeed the landscape ready for investment. And Uganda being Uganda, we do not have the money required to invest, especially in exploration, because the mining journey is a bit lengthy. Okay, so the exploration bit, now I know NSSF MD earlier on mentioned that, the money is seated there, unfortunately he's left. We need his WhatsApp number so that we can be able to see, look, there is need for investment in exploration to be able to ascertain the commercial quantities of these minerals so that the big players can be able to know, look, there is the lithium, there is the graphite, there is the beryllium, the tantalite, the tin, the copper in Uganda, and they are invest in actually mining it. So the landscape is ready for investment, is open, and at this point in time, the biggest need is for investment, especially in exploration.
Thank you, Humphrey. I have a follow-on question about the energy mix. You spoke about the 52,000, but I'll come to that. I don't know if we have Gabriel yet. If not, we'll proceed, and then hopefully you can join us in a bit.
Yes, I am on.
Oh, there we are. So Gabriel, good morning and welcome. I'll allow you to introduce yourself, and then we can proceed.
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for having me here. I am Dr. Gabriel, Assistant Commissioner at the Energy and Minerals Development, with an experience of over 28 years in geological mapping, mineral exploration, project management. I'm also involved in international organizations like Organization of African Geological Survey, which is basically a collaboration of African Geological Surveys to exchange ideas, to collaborate on experience and geological information. I'm also collaborating and a counterpart with the Atomic Energy Agency on technical cooperation in uranium exploration and evaluation program. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gabriel. Just to carry on from what you've just mentioned. So as a ministry, we know, and we've just been speaking about it, and in addition to what Humphrey has mentioned, there's a lot of opportunity potentially for the private sector. We're curious to understand the strategy on the side of government to support more participation of the private sector beyond the regular roles you play of licensing, regulation, and all that. What is this strategy, and how does it serve to support Humphrey and his members?
Yeah, thank you. I think let me put the video off because my network is not so nice. Apart from streamlined procedures in licensing, where we have robust, efficient, predictable, and legal regulatory framework, we have carrying out geological surveys. This includes airborne geophysical survey of the whole country. It was mentioned by Humphrey that 80% was done. Now the 20% is being completed. And this data is very useful in attracting.
Hello? Did we lose Gabriel? Okay, I think we'll, hopefully he can reconnect shortly. And as we wait for him to get back, Ms. Esther, I would want to move over to you. So, of course, the economy in Botswana is known for the mining sector. And the Botswana particularly is a success story in terms of partnership between private sector and government. So these are things we talk about here. We don't have much experience, specifically in the mining space. So it would be good to hear from you some of the key ingredients that made that partnership a success, and some of the things that we need to be thinking about as we continue to explore that route in Uganda.
Thank you very much,
colleagues, I'm sorry.
Mr. Moderator. Oh.
Colleagues?
Yes, Gabriel, we hear you.
Should I go ahead or should I give a...
Yeah, I think
just give me some few minutes as continue. Hopefully the network will stay. One of the strategies is also to carry out detailed geological surveys. Government has now procured the equipment, exploration equipment. Mineral laboratory analysis is put up in place. And then we're also training our geoscientists in mineral exploration and geological mapping. We are promoting value addition such that we can get maximum value out of our minerals. These information are packaged and disseminated to potential investors. In collaboration with the Ministry of Finance and Economic Planning, we place incentives to attract investment. As for the energy transition minerals, as stated earlier, we have good indications of copper, cobalt, nickel, lithium, graphite, manganese, rare earth elements, and uranium. All these are very prospective resources that we have. And we now need to explore, mine, and promote value addition. This entails capacity building in these critical resources because they are specialized. We also need to develop skills in the industry so that we can carry out processing and development of these mineral resources, and also the local content to have business around these mineral targets. To have the mineral resources developed, to guarantee investment, you need to secure markets and supply through partnerships, diplomatic ties, and agreements. You see, these mineral resources have become political issues. You can see the war in Ukraine and Russia tagged to energy resources, minerals, coal is an issue, uranium is an issue. So we need to have strategic partnerships in dealing in these minerals. Besides, we also have to put in place requisite infrastructure for this development. I'm talking about roads, electricity, water sources, railways, and so forth. I hope I've been audible to you, and thank you for listening to me. Thanks.
Thank you, Gabriel, and thank you for sharing. We'll come back to the follow-on question. Esther, I hope you're still there. We can pick up on the question I just asked.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm still here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Wonderful. I'd like to just preface my response to the question you asked by quoting the second president of the Republic of Botswana, the late Sekitumile Masire, who, when asked about how Botswana managed to escape the resource curse, he said, Botswana was lucky to discover good people before discovering diamonds. So really, I think it was a question of just having people who were committed to ensuring that the benefits of the diamond revenues, because at the time it was only diamonds, still in the main case, the diamond revenues benefit everybody. And I think one of the reasons that happened is because the president then was our first president, Cesar Sakama, and the first diamond mine was discovered in his area. So in his own wisdom, he felt that he cannot appropriate the resources out of the revenues out of these diamonds to his area. He wants them shared across the country. And I think the other thing was that Botswana was one of the poorest countries in the world at the time that we got independence in 1966. So fortunately for us, the good people ensured that the diamond revenues are shared across the entire country. Secondly, the partnership that was developed with obviously De Beers were the prospectors. Their geologists discovered the deposit at Urapa in 1967, and they committed to developing that using their own resources. But in the wisdom of the leadership at the time, there was a need. They insisted on having a partnership. It started off as a very small partnership. I think if I recall, it was like 25% partnership for the government of Botswana and then the rest for De Beers. That has progressively developed to a point where it's now 50-50. Of course, following the discovery of Orapa, then we hit the jackpot with Jwaneng, which was discovered in 1972 and became operational 10 years later in 1982, primarily because the deposit in Jwaneng was much, much deeper in the sand than the discovery in Orapa. As it is now, Orapa is mining at a depth of about 350 meters, whereas Jwaneng has gone to about 900 meters. So that's the the disparity in the level of depth in terms of the deposits. So Botswana is currently mining different minerals. We have, of course, the diamonds. We have coal. We have soda ash. We have copper, nickel, silver, gold, industrial diamonds, industrial minerals, and semi-precious stones. But we also have known deposits of uranium, iron ore, coal bed methane, and the PGMs. So we really, there's still a lot of potential. And the government Botswana Geoscience Institute, which promotes the search for and exploration of minerals in Botswana, is hard at work to ensure that they attract investors to come and explore these minerals and eventually lead to their mining. So the partnership with De Beers is renewed after every 10 years in the diamond space. And obviously, the Botswana Diamond Company is the mining entity. We've now developed, the initial stages of the value chain, because we now sort the diamonds. Of course, we've been sorting the diamonds for much longer, but over and above that, the sales wing of De Beers was also transferred to Botswana about 15 or so years ago. So the current mode is to beneficiate in Botswana, to have the entire value chain of the diamond industry in Botswana. And as some of you may be aware, recently the agreement between De Beers and the government of Botswana was renewed in July this year for another 10 years. And during this particular one, and the negotiations were not very easy, I must say. They were very, very tough because Botswana wanted a lot more from De Beers than has hitherto been the case. So now, with the new agreement, De Beers has committed to making Botswana a natural diamond jewelry manufacturing hub. Over and above that, Botswana did set up its own marketing wing for diamonds with the last agreement that ended 2 years ago. And that agreement said up to 15% of diamonds are going to be given to this Okavango Diamond Company to test the market independently of the De Beers sales mode. So Diamond ODC, Okavango Diamond Company, is busy selling diamonds. Right now, the portion that they've been given is now 20%, 25% of Debswana's run of mine. So if Debswana, for example, produces like they did in 2022, 24 million carats, 25% of those will be given to ODC to sell, and they currently sell through auctions and through other modes of sales. So that's where we are now. As Botswana, in the diamond space, it is our hope and our prayer that we become the capital of diamond sales, jewelry, the works. The entire value chain will come and reside in this country. So that is the space of diamonds. Of course, the other space that we are in is coal. We have had a coal mine operating, which was originally owned by Anglo-American with a certain percentage belonging to government, but now Anglo-American has disinvested in that. It is now a wholly owned government private coal mining company. So it has been mining coal since 1973, and they are continuing to do that. They have a coal wash plant that tries to beneficiate the coal before exporting it. But more importantly, it supplies coal to one of our major electricity generating plants in Murupule, which supplies the country with electricity. The main electricity for the country comes from there. It's not sufficient. It's augmented by imports from South Africa and from Mozambique. I would like to pause there and maybe have any further clarity that you may have, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Esther, for that background. Yes, I do have a follow-on question, which I will come to. But for me, I think if the key ingredient is good people, I think we are fine, right? In Uganda, we don't have a shortage of good people. If that's what it takes to develop the sector, we will be okay. George, Tanzania, with your experience and the background you just shared, as you know, ours is still a very nascent industry. It'd be good to hear some of the key lessons that you've been through having worked in multiple jurisdictions doing this kind of work. Over to you, George.
Yeah, it was very refreshing to listen to Esther's presentation. I've been across mines in Botswana, and I think they are a story that should be replicated across Africa. But just before I start with some specifics, I'd like to make some general comments. Before independence, most of our countries talked about something called African emancipation. Fast track to the current times, there's a lot of talk about the African Renaissance. Basically, what we seek is financial independence with food security, good education, and health systems. We relied a lot in the past on people that we called development partners. I think it's dawned on us that these folks are not exactly our development partners. Where our solutions lie, the solutions lie in ourselves. And when I say in ourselves, like in the Ugandan case, the solution for Uganda or a solution for Kenya does not rely on Ugandans or the Kenyans, but it relies on Africans. So we have to be Africa-centric. And that is something that I'm going to talk about a lot in this presentation. And the only development institution that I may refer to is the African Development Bank or the East African Development Bank or the PTA Bank, Afri-Exim Bank. None of those Ivy League educated institutions run across the Atlantic or the Mediterranean I think that you guys have had first-hand experience. And when we listen to Jeffrey Sachs or Joseph Stiglitz, we know what goes on in their inner corridors. So we have to be very, very Africa-centric. And I would like to present emphatically that I don't think that we've done enough in this regard. And we are not exploiting the IP that exists across the continent. And that's why, despite the fact that most of our countries, if you look at the history of mining, it's over 100 years old. But the successes are so diverse and varied. And so the question is that how can we bridge that gap? If Botswana has done well, Namibia has done well, or South Africa, is that what are some of the dynamics in those countries that we can learn? An important thing, of course, is governance, which is Esther's emphasized very much so. Intellectual property, exchange of knowledge across the continent. And I heard Humphrey and Gabriel talk about the geological studies. My question, which to them will be, which of those geologists come from the rest of the continent? We know that Tanzania, Zambia, going all the way to Southern African countries, we have highly, highly experienced geologists that have worked for multinational corporations. They've operated in mines, even in Australia, which are some of the biggest mines in the world. Are those the folks that are helping you with your exploration? Because what happens when it comes to funding, the document that is presented has got to reflect international standards and has got to have that rubber stamp of somebody that people recognize internationally. That's what the dynamics of the game is. So what we need to face is what really works out there when it comes to funding. And what is also something we've got to emphasize is that if our solutions to our financial independence is going to be homegrown, and therefore the major solution is going to come from exploitation of our natural resources, have we given these ministries the importance in our environment? Are they the most critical ministries when we consider things, or are they still considered peripheral? You know, if Norway could exploit its oil and start a sovereign fund, and as statistics show right now, each citizen of Norway is worth $250,000. I mean, is that so far away from us? I think that we can achieve that. At least we should do something to achieve that. But allow me, Mark, to just share with you some of the things that I've seen across the continent. And there are a lot of similarities. For example, we all desire to empower citizens. And whether it is through the government institutions like Botswana has done, or through citizens, every mining act that I've perused has got this in the text. And the other thing is that we all have challenges with small and artisanal miners. And that is something that we need to discuss, is that where are the success stories? The corporate social responsibility is common in all the objectives of the countries, but with diverse results. Is that exactly why should bear that diversity? Is that how can we bridge that? We also talk about training and transfer of intellectual property. But again, if you look at it, we seem to be not united in trying to get that from within the continent. And that is something that we have to address. And then when you look at the tax structures also, the tax structures are very complex, and every other country is doing its own thing. But there are some folks that have done better than the others. And what could we borrow from there? How could we harmonize some of these things? Now, where my forte is the approach to mining. And this is where there's a complete difference between the Southern African countries and our region. Like, you know, if you talk to a miner in Tanzania, if somebody comes to you, wants equipment, because I run an equipment rental company and I'm a contract miner, I've worked in the coal mines, in the gold mines, is that the presentation from an entity out of Tanzania or Botswana or Zambia will be very different from a presentation from Kenya or Uganda. And this is something that we have to address. Most of the time, and I think, David, you may have listened to me during my presentation in Nairobi, is that the professional approach with the Southern African countries is what makes them leap in bounces when it comes to implementation of the projects and raising financing. For example, geotech study. Geotech studies is extremely important. Drilling and doing exploration. I talked with Humphrey yesterday, and it seems like Uganda is doing a lot of that. But have you borrowed from some of the countries out in Southern Africa? For example, I know some cases where everybody that does any kind of drilling, like let's say if you're drilling a borehole, those soil samples have got to be given to the government, because that is an easy one for you to go and check where some of these minerals are. The other thing is many times out of Kenya, and a few times from some of the Ugandan entrepreneurs, I've been told that, look, you're a contract miner, okay, fine, I need an excavator from you. So my first question is that, what size of excavator do you need? And then somebody tells me that, oh, well. So in other words, they have not thought through the process. Now, somebody in Tanzania or Zambia or Botswana is very unlikely to ask me that. They will tell me about their geotech study. They'll talk to me about the volumes that they intend to mine per month. They'll talk to me about the strip ratios. So there are certain fundamentals that they'll present to you that in straight away, you can be able to think about your equipment configuration, which is what size of excavator you need, what size of trucks, those little technical details that make success. And those are the things that also financiers lack. Now, when it comes to the participation of NSSF, and I'd like to, I like the presentation of the CEO, Ayota, but one thing that I didn't hear from him, which I experienced directly in Namibia, is the Namibian pension fund invested in different funds that then empowered people. And some of the people that they empowered are people in the mining space. So when we were a shareholder in one of those investment funds receiving money from the pension funds, we financed a lot of Namibian contractors. And some of them were small, and then they became very big. And that is something that we need to replicate in this part of the world. The other thing is where we ask the miners or the mining companies to see ways that they can empower the locals. And they can start with their own stuff. I saw this in South Africa, where somebody next to the platinum mine who used to work for the mine was given the crushing activity. And so he had an off-taker already available. He also had the material, and all he had to do was to get a contract and go to a financier where he got crushing machines, and they started doing work. There's a major success story, and they replicated that across the country. So with those few remarks, Mark, I'm open to questions.
Thank you, George. So I have one follow-up question for everybody on the panel. Then we'll probably take one question from the room, and then, like I said, we can push other questions to the business circle session. We have about 15 minutes to wrap up our session. My first question is over to you, Esther, regarding, you spoke about good people, which we have. You spoke about surviving the resource curse in Botswana. My question is really around that piece, the socio-economic development, and how equitable that distribution of wealth that has come out of this partnership has been. That's one of our concerns here. ASMs at Zino Miners are in the thousands, and whenever big corporate comes in, there's always a concern about what happens to that group. So it'd be good to understand your experience, both in terms of the PPP you had with the government, but also what that has meant for the small-scale miners.
Thank you very much. One of the things that we really don't have is really small-scale miners. We have small suppliers to the mines, but not small-scale mines. We are seeing now in the copper space a number of Australian companies that are mining in the copper space out in Hansi and in the Maun area. But what we have, at least in the Botswana space, is empowerment programs that are aimed at getting the supply chain to be predominantly where possible, of course, predominantly citizen controlled. So we have, Botswana has developed over the past 5 years now, a program called the Citizen Economic Empowerment Program. And this program, the company invested 20 billion pula. I think a pula is about, how many pulas to a dollar? Probably about 40 pulas per dollar. So you can do the monthly. So 20 million pula was set aside for the program. We call it, in short, Citizen Economic Empowerment Program. This program supports local citizen companies to be able to develop their skills and knowledge to be able to supply goods and services to the mines. So they've put together a program. In some cases, it has been a business development program where they've taken a company, handheld it until it has graduated from the program. So that is one of the ways that the equitability of the resources has been at least taken local economic prowess of the people. But over and above that, Botswana is one of the biggest corporate citizen investment companies in Botswana, with a budget of up until now 30 million pula every year going into the different areas of the country. So what they do is they have 10 million pula going to the Orapa area, 10 million pula going to the Jwaneng area, and 10 million pula residing with the corporate center, which is based in Gaborone, but then catering for other areas of the country. So that's how it has been. We have managed to ensure that the social benefits are spread out throughout the country. But of course, government of Botswana is a shareholder, so whatever profits Botswana make from the sale of diamonds, 50% goes to the government, and the rest goes to 50% goes to BS. But at last calculation, if I recall, the Botswana government, if you add on the royalties and the taxes, out of the money that Botswana would make, the Botswana government would get about 66% in total, which goes obviously into the fiscus of the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. My following question is for Gabriel, and this is something also that George spoke to, which is skills. As the sector grows, we've also seen this in the oil space. What is truly happening on the part of government to ensure that we have the necessary skills? George was asking, of all the prospecting and the surveying we're doing, how many of these people are actually indigenous Africans, but also Ugandans? So it'd be good to understand also from the ministry side what is happening in terms of skills, jobs, what conversations are happening between your ministry, education, curriculum development center, and everybody to ensure that we truly have those skills when we need them, especially knowing the space private sector plays in terms of education, but what's happening at the government level. Gabriel.
Yeah, thank you for that question. And I really needed to respond to George's questions. I would like to state that the government is committed to capacity building in geosciences. And what's happening is we have institutions, the Makerere University, we now have Busitema, we have Nkumba, all those offering courses in geosciences. However, we need that experience George was talking about, so that we can have confidence in our geological resource report, that investors can listen and accept. This one also happens in some ways. In terms of mineral development, we have in the industry, because we have the companies coming with their geologists from outside, and these geologists sometimes have our own geologists from Uganda who are attached to work with them. We have Canadians who have worked in Uganda on some mineral developments. experts from UK, from Australia, from South Africa, who have worked alongside the Ugandan geologists and other geoscientist disciplines. We are having a collaboration with the International Atomic Energy Agency, experts on uranium exploration. I think this one is building our capacity in along the whole value chain of uranium development. And we believe that with time, we shall also have the expertise because we are dealing with the resource persons from Atomic Energy Agency. The geological surveys that were carried out in 2004 to 2012 involved experts or consultants from CGS of South Africa. We had GTK of Finland. All these ones worked alongside our geologists and geochemists and geophysics to bring out the number of mineral targets that were established as a result of the geological surveys. And we built a lot of experience out of it. Now, we do not have the competence or the mineral classification system to be done by competent person. The government is working on domesticating mineral classification system and reporting code so that we can have competent persons in Uganda to do the reporting such that investors can believe in it and come up with investment plans. We're working with African Union on African mineral and energy resource classification and management system. That is one of the areas. We work with the United Nations fossil classification. We are studying this one so that we can see which one to domesticate. And all these are geared towards solving the issue of competent person in reporting. We now as a government and in the region have joint permanent commissions with various countries. I know Tanzania, I know of Kenya, DRC, South Africa, Burundi, and Rwanda. In different sectors of the government, they are coming up with areas of cooperation and also signing memorandum of understanding. If we are to do that in the mineral sector, I know that we haven't signed any memorandum of understanding on the mineral collaboration. But if we are to do that, then we will share expertise in the region. Like from Tanzania, we have a very resourceful person from Tanzania. I can tell you who are also in this country working in some of these mines who visit our directorates and provide technical assistance. We will then work with South Africans, maybe in terms of exchanges of technical persons. You can have our young geologists attached in the mine. We can have trainings in all this one will happen. So I really call for collaboration in the areas of geoscience discipline development. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabriel. Humphrey, over to you. If you can just make a quick comment on the skills, but also a question regarding the energy mix you mentioned, 52,000 megawatts by the end of, you said 2040. 2040. Yeah. What are you members thinking? Because we heard about prioritization. So these opportunities present different returns on investment, different timeframes. As private sector, what are you thinking in terms of that intent, and where are you truly going to put your money, considering that they don't present the same return profile?
Thank you. On the skilling question, it is true there is need for some more work on skilling in the mining sector in Uganda. I mentioned in my introduction that I'm a geologist by training, and I remember the time I graduated from university as a geologist, first of all, we started 12 in the class. We graduated only 6 of us as geologists at the time. Years later, the course on geology was scrapped for whatever reason. It's only later on when the whole oil and gas story began to gain momentum, that almost every university now started picking up and saying, look, hey, we have a skills gap here. We need to begin training geophysicists, metallurgists, geological engineers, hydrologists, and all those kinds of things. And it is true right now in the private sector, there is a skills gap when it comes to Ugandans who are qualified to do the work. Even when you go to the Department of Geological Survey and Mines of the government of Uganda, it is not fully established in terms of the number of skills that are required there. And yes, the collaborations across Africa are very important to be able to gain from other jurisdictions like Tanzania, South Africa, Botswana, Namibia, and get some of those people working here in Uganda so that we move forward. The kind of intervention that was done in oil and gas when it comes to skilling needs to also be done in the mining sector as well, so that we can fast track availing the skill for this sector. Now, on the issue, on the question that you asked about, in the whole energy mix, the 52,000 megawatts that is an ambitious target for this country by 2040, where do we see the opportunities? I just want to paint a continuum for our viewers and listeners that when you talk of mining, mining has different phases in the entire value chain. The very first phase is the prospecting, where you are looking to see what kind of rocks are in this area. You know, for example, rare earth elements that are used for making magnets and used for making and are used in the energy sector occur in clay rocks. So you're looking for clay rocks. Where do they occur? You know what kind of rocks you'll find gold, what kind of rocks you'll find copper. So that is the prospecting side of things. Now, government of Uganda has done a lot of work around that through the aerial geomagnetic surveys that Gabriel was talking about, where 80% of the country has been covered. And there are indications of where you can find gold, where you can find lithium, where you can find uranium, where you can find the rare earths, where you can find all these minerals. Now, the next step is what you call the ground exploration, where you actually have to invest in a particular area to quantify what do we have there. What is it, and is it of commercial quantities? We're talking about, say, the rare earths that we are doing in Makutu in eastern Uganda. The project in Makutu in eastern Uganda by Rwenzori Rare Earth has so far taken 15 years as we speak right now, and they have never produced. But they are hoping to begin production maybe 2026. Now, so far, the investment that has gone into that alone, so far as we speak today, is about $20 million. The next step is actually a demonstration plant. And that demonstration plant will require another $8 million. Now, the plant to produce these heavy magnets from that will require about $120 million. And they're now in the process of sourcing the financing after having gotten the licensing. But they have done a lot of work in the ground exploration to actually quantify the value of the minerals in the area and their commercial viability. Then the next step from the exploration would be trying to make sure that you have a plant to produce, okay, or to mine. And then from mining, there is what we call beneficiation. That is the purification, the refining, and so that you are selling at the highest purity levels and you're able to get the highest returns. As a country, we've done a good job in the prospecting. We are seeking investment, especially in the exploration, as we get to attract the big boys to come in and build the plants, do the mining and sell, do the beneficiation and then the selling, okay? And each mineral marquee has its own value chain, has its own distinct value chain. And the country has a new law that encourages no export of ore. It must be value added here in the country. So the opportunities exist at exploration, and that's the reason as to why there are many investors that have risk capital that they can be able to put in the exploration, because it does take time. It's not a 1 year, it is a number of years that have got to be put in. And once that has been just quantified and they're sure about the commercial viability, then the next steps are will be taken on. So, but I believe as a country, when it comes to exploration, when it comes to mining, attracting mining companies to come into the country, we have the regulations in place. Incidentally, we also have in the regulations the Uganda National Mining Company that is meant to hold the interests of the country in each and every one of these mining enterprises as we go.
Thank you. Thank you for that picture, Humphrey. Hopefully at the Uganda Mining Company, we also have good people there. All right? George, we'll finalize with you. And this is very directly related to what Humphrey has been talking about. He's been throwing out very many figures, 20 million, 8 million, 120 million. What are the key financing structures we need to have in place? Quickly.
Okay.
To allow us to make all this possible.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. And I fully subscribe to what Humphrey has said. He's been very spot on facts. But I'd like to qualify that a little bit, is that different minerals have got different ways of doing exploration. For example, the investment in exploration might turn out to be very high, but that's not the same for limestone, and that's not the same for pozzolana, which have still got a very big market because the cement production is increasing in all our countries. So they are starting to gain traction, and this is my advice usually to locals that are interested in mining, is that go with the simpler ones. And gain resources, and based on that resource base, then go and do a gold exploration. And if your initial data looks good, and you start going out to talk to some of the majors, based on the data that you have got, especially if you have somebody out of South Africa that you probably just paid maybe $20,000 or $30,000 for to come into Uganda and help out. You may find that you meet success a lot quicker than that. So it's not always that you have to start at the top level, sequence it. I remember one time, very naive as a corporate finance guy, I had a gold mining opportunity, and I went to see one of our MPs here, who was he was the president of the African Gemstones Association, and so he knew everything about gemstones. And when I presented the proposal to him, he laughed. He says, "Look, come to my office, I'll teach you the basics of mining." And he said, "Look, the way I did it is that I started going into the holes myself as a young man, but over time, when I had some resources, I created a buying company. So I had a company that was buying those minerals from the folks that would go into the hole, and then I'd sell. And over time, I became so big that then I developed my own mine. And as we were talking with him, he was into beneficiation of rubies and all over the world. So there are ways to sequence this. The buy is always not too high. If you aim too high, then you'll never start. So start with the simple things. But that said, coming back to Humphrey's angle, is that the geotech studies are extremely important. Most importantly, have it certified by a company that is highly reputable. One that if it goes to, let's say, the Toronto Stock Exchange or the Australian one, the folks then will be excited about it. But if they see, a name like Miseda signing the document, then they might not be very interested. So the saying goes is that if the report is credible and credibility is established by a company that is reputable, most likely you will attract funding because there's a big market for these commodities.
Thank you. Thank you to all our panelists. Question? Yes. So as we wrap this up, we just have time for 1 or 2 questions, if that's okay. If you have any burning questions, following this, there will be the business circle, which will be more conversation, and there'll be time to bring up other questions. But for now, we'll take a few questions. If you can be specific with the questions are 2, maybe we'll take the online question first. There's somebody online, you said? Do you have a hand? Sure.
Thank you. My name is Alex Matua from Nile Microfinance, Arua. This is a very wonderful presentation. When Honorable Dr. Engineer made a remark on the bidimensional meter, as a private sector player, it struck me of the business opportunity. Similarly, when the panelists were deliberating, making their keynotes on the mineral exploration and their linkage with energy, truly you can see the opportunity. But for the private sector to take up this, what is the key ingredient? For us in the private sector to invest, we need information, we need data. Now, when he talked about bidimensional meter, how do I take this opportunity? I need to look at the revenue sources in this investment. I need to look at my cost centers so that as an investor, I can leap into this. This is not a common business like general trade, what I know best, finance and market industry. Without this data, it becomes very difficult for us to invest. This is a new area. I therefore would like to see that you should be able to help us provide the necessary information, the necessary data that can enable the private sector to be able to take this opportunity on adequate cost-benefit analysis. Otherwise, if I cannot establish my liquid assets, I won't be able to take this and cash cycles in this investment. This is a hybrid investment that needs a lot of key stakeholders, technical people like you, Humphrey with your leadership, all the panelists. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for your question. Unfortunately, I've been informed that in the interest of time, we are going to have this discussion in the business circle, which is going to follow. So we have a keynote speaker coming up who is short on time, after which we'll have the business circle. So we have taken your question. Kindly stick around. We shall address it. And if anybody else has a question, please stick around. That part of the discussion is meant to be conversational. You have a burning question? And then we'll wrap up this part of the session. Again, I apologize. We're just trying to get caught up with time. We're delayed by the weather this morning.
Please welcome our keynote speaker, Catherine Forster. Catherine Forster is the Executive Director of the Green Digital Finance Alliance, a member of the EU EIT Food Supervisory Board, and co-lead of UNFCCC Global Innovation Hub Cities Working Group and the UNEP Digital Circular Economy Lab. As a former Canadian diplomat, she has been spearheading impact innovation for 30 years, including roles with the Climate KIC, FIDES Microfinance, and award-winning digital innovation startups and accelerators. She has also served as Sharper to the UN Secretary General Task Force on Digital Finance and as an advisor for the World Bank Carbon Markets Blockchain Pilot and the Bank of International Settlement Project's Genesis Digital Green Bonds Report.
Distinguished guests, honorable members of the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development and government participants, fellow participants, and esteemed colleagues. Indeed, our purpose today is profound: to discuss, collaborate, and propel the energy and minerals sector forward in Uganda to meet the climate and SDG agendas together while we do so. I'm honored to be here with you and to share some experience from my 30+ years of a career to highlight the transformative power of innovation, of local contextualized solution building, capacity building, collaboration, and sustainable finance in driving impactful change. I would like to start by just highlighting some key personal, professional background that have served me in this path, and then share highlights from the larger ecosystem as well as GDFA. So I will share my screen now. I come from you originally from Canada, but now from Switzerland. I have a background that was informed by geography, including geology, geographic information systems, and science. And my initial project was on looking at Hydro-Quebec James Bay, and then early GIS for resource community assessment. But at the time, academia wasn't ready for this type of cross-siloed, cross-sectoral work. So I left my doctoral work and joined the Canadian Foreign Service, where I worked on NAFTA, climate, and human security in the 1990s, including under Kofi Annan's peace-building processes and the Kimberley Diamond process. And then when Canada left Kyoto and human security, I left Canada and I went to Switzerland, where I began international collaborations, as mentioned, with Swiss science institutions, setting up the first Namibia Microfinance Bank, the World Bank, the UN Secretary General Task Force, and a number of other initiatives, including startups working on energy and natural resources. This early work I mentioned because it gave me this broad insight, lateral insight into negotiation processes, trade policies, community stakeholder engagement, the financing, the monitoring, reporting, and verification issues, the certification issues around siloed solution gaps, the physical, the digital, the data, the policy, and moreover, the need for homegrown, contextualized, integrated local solutions and skills development across policy through to technology, through to the actual physical infrastructure. I am now for the last year and a half and previously working with the GDFA, currently as the executive director. And the Green Digital Finance Alliance, GDFA, is a Swiss-based not-for-profit that enables and co-creates digital financing innovation for climate and SDG challenges, which is a broad sweeping statement, but it actually started very concretely out of some new emerging technologies in 2014-15, including ant forest, China's preeminent digital fintech initiative by Jack Ma and Alibaba and Ant Group. So it came out of this background, but combined with the UNEP and the World Bank inquiry into designing a sustainable financial system, this evolved and was launched in 2017 at the World Economic Forum. And for the first few years, when I served as CIO, we actually were Sherpa to the task force, really helping with the policy and actually starting doing experimentation and building out tools and resources. And of course, providing those key recommendations to the task force reports, People's Money. And since taking over as executive director in 2022, I have focused on more of a lab and demonstrator approach. So you can see some of our initiatives online, a lot of thought leadership, a lot of advisory for the G20, the UN, etc. But then we started building out actual tools and frameworks and pilots and demonstrators. And these were really important to really proving the case and to getting over that initial hype of fintech and digital innovation to really proving use cases and integrating local stakeholders. And this is the lab approach that I currently have in place. I've been working on for a number of years, even before when in my previous roles with the EU's largest innovation community, Climate Kick. And this lab approach is both for policy as well as for practical solutions, and is cross-thematic and cross-regional. So it's the agility in that lab approach and demonstrator approach that has allowed us to really dive in very quickly to bring in stakeholders and sort of build out specific innovations and open platforms. So we have, a digital aggregated green bonds for aggregating community projects. We have sort of a model that is building out of our initial toolbox that was then taken up by the Bank of International Settlement. And then we also have sustainable cities and moreover energy communities, as well as natural capital, biodiversity, and agriculture. And moreover, we actually co-create. We cannot do this alone. We're a very small NGO and get project funding. So I've been working with the UNFCCC Global Innovation Hub and a broader ecosystem of collaborators to actually focus on these themes and to build out those pilots and demonstrators and frameworks. And some examples, as you've already seen on that initial slide, include readiness and classification frameworks, green bond toolbox that can be used and integrated for local contacts and stakeholders, an innovation management tracker, and the innovation passports for solutions, as well as something called the Encyclopenergy. And this is a crowdsourced and open source catalog of energy efficient enablers. And I mention these because it is this type of toolbox that helps bring cross-stakeholder, cross-community, cross-research capacity together, including on policies, to really help focus and share in a very contextualized way. And these have been used across regions and across sectors globally. And some highlights that I think are relevant today includes the UNFCCC Global Innovation Hub, where we worked, I co-led the cities and energy theme, and also worked on the BC, British Columbia and Canada mines traceability pilot. And we are now, GDFA is now focusing on energy communities in Canada, which are locally contextualized communities, and circular and sustainable city demonstrators. And through this, we're creating those open platforms and tools and those community-based models. And the focus here is data-driven, of course, but I really highlight the need for local and contextualized knowledge, because a data-driven focus can be exclusive as well and create more of a digital divide. So it's really important to ensure the local capacity building and local knowledge is transferred into these higher tech solutions, because we see across sectors there's a lot of assumptions about data readiness. And it is the monitoring, reporting, and verification side that's really important here. I just wanted to highlight that Energy Minds Digital Trust Pilot, which you can find online. I had a very small role in this, but I want to highlight some good practices, because this was, again, under the umbrella of the United Nations Climate Change Global Innovation Hub. And with the amazing British Columbia Ministry and experts, we sort of did a pilot on a digital trust ecosystem between organizations, business, and individuals. And initially, this was looked at sort of internally, not cross-border, but with the issues around sourcing minerals and sourcing fuels and the new policies in the EU, this part of it, I think, was an essential element. But it was about technology, sort of bringing technology to industry-specific regulations, helping to identify best practices, creating a highly replicable framework that can be scaled globally. And they prioritize the use of interoperability technology, processes, and data standards, so that we could overcome those barriers to adoption, encourage the uptake of new tools, but also address things like varied reporting standards, diverse regulatory models, and the lack of data or integrated standardized data and digital tools. And this improved the method for exchanging data that allowed governments and organizations to share certificates, permits, and other data security issues, and to streamline the processes to improve the efficiency and reduce risk. It also helped us provide trustful trustworthy and transparent information to the interested parties. So this is continuing. I'm no longer involved in that, but I really encourage you to look at that best practice. And I think one element that for me is important too is what we're now focusing on at GDFA is a new project being led out of British Columbia again, and we're the international partner. And this is the Accelerating Community Energy Transformation, ACET, with partners across academia and most importantly, First Nations, community-led, plus private, public, and not-for-profit organizations, including GDFA. And I mention this because we often talk about global north and global south issues, but this demonstrates some of the capacity and the innovations that are building out in the global north, but with those types of communities that face some similar challenges. So these communities lie outside major metropolitan areas, and they rely on diesel for electricity to power their everyday life. And through this collaboration, we're working with the communities themselves to define their energy needs along with their economic, social needs, health, culture, etc. And so as the partners, we're helping to identify the pathways and implement the energy infrastructure, as well as the business models and finances that will help them benefit the health, environment, and society generally. And that net zero energy system it's more than just respecting the environment. So it's also about the storage, the distribution, and the financing that goes back into the community, including the services that they determine they need. And so GDFA is leading on the finance model and the innovation needed, both low and high tech, and the integration across those. And we hope that this serves as a model of how to power those communities and demonstrate that capacity. I also wanted to highlight some of the two other models and tools that I think could be useful and I'm interested in addressing here. And that is what started in 2018 as a sort of blockchain for digital green bonds toolbox. And there it was more about addressing the efficiencies of large-scale innovations, large-scale energy infrastructure, for example, looking at the issuance, but also on the monitoring, reporting, and verification. And what we've done over the years, and what I've done both with GDFA and other organizations, is use this to demonstrate how we can aggregate smaller infrastructure, smaller investable projects, everything from smallhold farmers to small energy, solar and wind, etc., into aggregated investments. And this has been taken up by the Bank of International Settlement. And we're now looking at engaging this model with carbon forward element for the digital green bonds. So we'll be investigating that going forward as well. And again, the key is working with the stakeholders. And then again, something that we found very useful across our EU and international projects was while we were looking at the innovative business models and finance models, and these aren't revolutionary, it's often about data to unlock existing finance models for community stakeholders, community associations, and even individual homeowners or SMEs. It's about finding the right data to unlock the right business models for those financing solutions and working with regulatory frameworks while also helping to inform new ones. So this has been a really important example of the type of open sourced and open source platform that could be integrated and scaled. Finally, I just want to say that this to me is a really important approach for innovation, for sustainable finance and integrated solutions, particularly in the energy and mining areas, is that co-creation and demonstration to enable and work with existing policy and governance to address the monitoring, reporting, and verification needs that we've seen from very early days and the lessons I learned with the Kimberley Diamond process, and to have the contextualized approaches that enable what I call the 4Gs: geographic, gender, generational, and groups of stakeholders to be involved to increase the capacity building on the ground as well. So I would like to say that the common elements and any recommendations I would humbly offer from that, overarching experience is just that the systems innovation approach, it's about the process and the co-creation, finding your entry point into addressing the issues that we know we're facing. Having those community-centric models where possible, or stakeholder-centric models, integrate locally and relevant technology. We can't assume that a top-down approach, a solution that's built in California might work in Uganda. That we have to ensure that the technology is either evolves or is born out of the local context. And that also is true of the business models. The new business models for how to engage and have the finance focus and evolve into community benefits is really important. And that includes the financial mechanisms that can be unleashed or harnessed, both incumbent and new innovative financial mechanisms, as well as the digital and data infrastructure. Working on those from the start in any new project and existing projects, using standardization is really important. Connecting and emerging proven platforms are both available. And then to have that type of toolbox or demonstrator approach, it's a lower risk approach. I noted the example of the current pilot that's underway. That is the way that we find to really unlock innovation and ensure that the stakeholder processes, as well as policy engagement and evolution is possible. With that, I would just like to say that, by embracing the innovation, empowering communities, and redefining the financial landscapes internally as well as externally, we can create this legacy of positive change. We can catalyze impact on climate and sustainable development while upscaling and evolving our energy and mineral capacities to the benefit of all. With that, I say thank you. Asante sana.
Thank you very much, Catherine Foster, for that keynote address. If you could kindly stay online and see whether we can take some questions from the audience. I can see that Canadians have taken over. You're Canadian over there. We have Canadians here. And yeah, but we're ready for questions for Catherine. You have one? Yeah. Yeah, sure. Okay.
Catherine, hi. This is David Afungi. First of all, thanks for a brilliant presentation and that nice local tilt at the end with the Asante Sana. Some may say Webalenyo here, but well done. I think there's, as I mentioned, I think at the beginning, is that there's an interesting sandwich between our conversation right now and what happened at the African Climate Summit in September. And obviously, I think next week or the week after, there's the COP28 discussion. And I think one of the main principles speaks to that sort of end of the energy pyramid specifically. If you're to provide some advice on the back of the work that you've done in your presentations, what kind of narrative or what should we be insisting on in terms of making sure that the energy transition that we're speaking about is just on one hand, but also speaks to that last mile consumer. I think Humphrey spoke earlier about electrification rates. Not that stellar right now, but we can only do it if we have a component of off-grid power, but the financing mechanism is quite key. So I thought I'd just pick your thoughts on that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for that question and for the opportunity to address you. Again, I'm quite the generalist, so please take my any recommendations I give with that in mind. because I think, generally the focus in the past has been on investment in grid infrastructure and the fact that we have, in Global North and in the models of the past, sort of the business and corporate infrastructure in place or financing in place. And so addressing that energy infrastructure and energy transition really needs to be contextualized, and that means, and this is where I've worked on a number of pilots, both on solar and wind, and how to, and other types of renewable energy resources, and even my former colleague worked on the cook stove project in Uganda. And what we learned, I think, is that that renewable energy integration can happen through the digital infrastructure. So you can have small installations without having to have the big physical integrated infrastructure. It's more about having the digital infrastructure. And that, of course, also means the connectivity issues have to be addressed, which is hopefully a smaller infrastructure gap to address than anything. And then the collaborations around the finance models really can be taking place if you can bring in the financial institutions, the government, the rating agencies, the data experts, to really find that model that can aggregate the impact and align that with the projects from different regions. These can be integrated into an investable product, but you do need some champions to actually get that started. So, it's really a chicken and egg problems of where do you start in that systems innovation. The models are there, some of the stakeholders are there. It's really about doing that stakeholder mapping and really understanding the context of where to go and what is needed in terms of the data and the financing that you have in place, and how to ramp that up through that systemic contextualized approach.
Okay, I think from me, I have one simple question. I need some bit of explanation on it. I notice here you are an advisor to the World Bank on blockchain for carbon credits. How does that work? I wanted to find from you.
Oh, I think you have experts in the room that could actually answer that directly over your conversations. But this was in the early days of blockchain, where there was a lot of assumptions about the technology and the readiness of the technology. However, we have now advanced, and we've gone through some periods of hype and different types of business models. But for carbon markets, what we know, some of the key challenges around carbon markets, and that goes for any I think resource natural development approach, is the monitoring, reporting, and verification. The World Bank blockchain was a huge collaboration with early innovators in blockchain, but also in data science, also on carbon markets, addressing the identified challenges, duplication, data, relevance data issues, are they reflecting the real impact or not? And then sort of enabling the capacity to have transparency on the interactions of the carbon credits and the verification of those carbon credits. The report is available online, but the overarching infrastructure was addressing some of the key challenges that we saw and still see in carbon markets, and that is the credibility issues, the duplication, the double counting, and issues of monitoring, reporting, and verification. So it really tried to address key elements of that, and there was a pilot that actually happened that proved the case. But what we've seen since then is a number of startups like Triangle and Evercity and others that have created platforms for those carbon credits to be exchanged, and for new carbon forwards to actually start evolving as well, with the real impact being integrated into the certificate.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have any further comments or questions from the audience? I don't see any. So I think I want to thank, where? There's one? Oh, there's one here. Can I give the mic to him?
Thank you. Engineer Willy Mumaso David, Minister of Energy and Mineral Development is my name. I've been listening to her presentation, and I was wondering how the digital technology can be actually integrated in the business models. Many of our businesses start, and the big question which is usually asked is, where can I get the financing for my projects? And many presentations are made to financing partners, and the first instinct is that, is it feasible? So how do we integrate these financing solutions into the business models from the start, so that it's not about waiting for a finished project and then financing is here? Thank you.
Oh, thank you for that very relevant question. I think this is where the landscape process begins, by looking at the current business funding options available, whether they be grants, whether they be venture capital, whether through incubator, if you're talking about startups and SMEs. For larger projects, of course, that's a new level. So this is where, with Encyclope Energy, we have a couple of categories, and that model can be transferred. So from a government perspective, this could be a very useful tool to create, where you have that type of platform that outlines all of the platforms that are available, all of the grants that are available. And it's an evolving, living platform. And it's also crowdsourced, so that you have different stakeholders, including those in the room, that have knowledge about the different options available to the different types of projects that are being initiated. And some of those do release the funding up front, so that could be part of it. So this is what GDFA does, is actually look at that overarching infrastructure and then dives in and pilots one based on the leverage room available. I also suggest that here the project must already have in place an understanding of the data that would be available for decision making. So, and it doesn't have to be very high-tech data, just understanding how the performance will be tracked, what the capacity will be, and how that will be measured. And then looking to the public-private partnerships here, where you don't have just one core top-down partner that is making all the decisions. Having that integrated model, even with community support, and finding resources within there. So I think there's 3 layers to the answer I have for you. But in terms of actually finding the funding, this is something I think we all struggle with, and this is why we share the common knowledge. But formalizing that sharing capacity is just as important as sharing the technology as well.
Okay. There being no further questions or comments, I would like to take this opportunity to thank Catherine Foster for the excellent presentation. On behalf of the organizers and the audience here, we thank you so much for the presentation.
Thank you.
I now hand over the mic back to the curator, that is Mr. Fungi.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks again, Catherine. So we, on account of whether we're running a little bit late, so I just propose that we try and get a short coffee, a short break, stretch our legs a little bit. And interestingly, what some of the points she made, Catherine, our keynote, made, segue to the next 2 presentations that we have, Mr. Chair. One from the Private Sector Foundation of Uganda, that is busy putting that foundational funding, particularly for the smaller and medium-sized businesses. And then UNCDF, my brother Joe Mundua, karibu sana. We'll talk about the initiative on clean energy work in Uganda, specifically around supporting last-mile clean energy access and implementation of parish model. And I'll implore Joe for you to track down Catherine and see how we can embed some of those learnings into the good work that you're doing. So we'll take a break now and perhaps reconvene in 15. Asante. And I think during the interlude there will be some videos playing. There's another partner out in Scotland that has some interesting technology, but yeah, and network as well. Thank you.